Like Tarantino can make a movie about basket weaving. I'm still going to go see it. So in Tulsa, if Andolini's is doing something, it carries a brand recognition because they know we're not going to half-ass it.
Hello and welcome to the Pre-Shift Podcast, the show featuring real restaurant people, real stories, and real advice on building high-performing teams. I'm DJ Costantino and I'll be your host. Mike Bausch joins us in the virtual studio today. Mike Bausch is a certified master pizzaiolo and the mastermind behind Andolini's Worldwide, a 12-restaurant empire in the heart of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Andolini's has earned nationwide top 10 pizzeria nods from TripAdvisor, BuzzFeed, CNN, and USA Today. Mike is not shy about sharing how he's gotten where he is either. He's a best-selling author, frequent conference speaker, and the creator of the Unsliced Restaurant System, a premium course for restaurant pros. On this episode, Bausch explains his philosophy on staff training and retention and why he avoids using the term family for his team. He talks about his transition into becoming a mentor and educator in the restaurant industry, launching his Unsliced course, and his goals on social media. As always, the Pre-Shift is brought to you by 7 Shifts. Enjoy the show. All right, Mike, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Absolutely. So I want to dive right in. What made you go down the path, become a pizzaiolo, restaurant owner, and did you ever envision yourself being responsible for a team of 300 people and a bunch of different restaurants?
Being in charge of a bunch of people, yes. Owning a restaurant, no, it wasn't the master plan. And when people say, like, did you always love pizza? I'm like, yeah, it's not a high bar. I'm kind of not unique there. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps who had, hundreds of people under him. I thought that I was going to be in the Marine Corps. I went into the Marine Corps and found I had juvenile type 1 diabetes. So while I was at officer candidate school to be, an officer like my dad, I found out right when I got back after doing the training that you're not doing this. So then it was like, I have all this leadership ability, but what are you going to do with it? And I was working restaurants to pay for college. I didn't realize I was, getting a second education there that I'd be using probably more than my poli-sci degree, which I am proud of. And I use that as well, but that's how it went down. And then pizza was like, all right, well, I've worked pizza. My brother had worked pizza. Let's do pizza. Not a ton of thought. But then it was like, hold on, we didn't open this to suck. The pizza's good enough for a Wasso, but we knew we had to learn as much as possible. And, I know guys who have grew up with their mom or dad's pizzeria or restaurant. The beauty of that time was there was 2004, there was still no availability of knowledge. Yeah. Fast forward 2 years after that, things started to open up. YouTube started to open up, and I got in with Tony Gimignani, who was for the first time teaching. So I went from having no mentor in pizza to the greatest mentor in pizza and being one of the first people he actively mentored. So I had a quick trajectory from being another pizza place to being an impeccable pizza place.
That's awesome. How did you connect with him?
We go back and forth on this as a funny story, but I just saw him on Food Network, and he had invented most of the pizza acrobatic tricks you see. But I saw his restaurant was highly lauded, and he was using the same oven as me, and I couldn't get anyone to answer my phone calls. So I just called him. I called 10 people, but he called back. I was like, hey, you're using a Rotoflex? So, okay, we'll do this, change this, do this, do this, do this. What else are you doing? And had no reason to do it, but I was like, wow, that's interesting, and that's kind of cool. So then I heard he was doing a professional class on pizza making that he went and took the college level course in Italy, brought it back. And I called him up for my second conversation with him, who he talks to people all the time. I was like, hey, can I come to that thing you're doing? And he's like, well, it's 10 days in Manteca, California, if you can get out here. So with the zero money I had, I got a flight, went out there and learned everything. And I was the youngest guy in the room, and it changed one of the many things that changed the trajectory of our restaurant's future.
That's awesome. So you had already been open before you went to do all that training, and it just came from a desire to be better, really.
For sure. And we were doing cool stuff. We were stretching fresh mozzarella already, which was fine dining restaurants don't do that. They mostly buy it already made. So the guys in that class were like, hey, this 25-year-old kid's kind of doing some interesting stuff, even though he's relatively new. And then I was asked to be on the World Pizza Champions competitive pizza team, and then I competed in Salsa Maggiore, Italy, and did really well. So it started to snowball from there.
That's awesome. And you're still on the competition circuit?
Well, so that's a whole separate, super interesting story. In that we was a team and competitors. By 2017, it was like grew to almost 50 people, and I said, Tony's like building stores left and right, and I was like, can we bring this together? Like we have all these individual movies. Can we make the Avengers?
Right.
And we created a 501c. We brought in not people purely that were competitive, but people that were consultants, people that were people that lived and breathed pizza and helping others became this group. And then I became vice president, and then over time became president of the group. We held the world. We had a Guinness record that we did here in Tulsa. We took the world's largest pizza party, which was 1,050 at the time, more than tripled it, all at one location, which is yet to be broken, to do it in one spot. And then all that money went to benefit Make-A-Wish. We sent 7 kids on their Make-A-Wish wishes. And so now it's a 501c. We had a book that came out that's a #1 Amazon best-selling cookbook, all with my my pizza people.
That's amazing. The pizza community stretches far and wide.
Yes, it's much tighter than the burger community. There's no Burger Con. There is Pizza Expo, though.
That is true. Yeah, and I definitely want to get into that a little bit more, but I am curious about the restaurants. So the growth that you guys have, you started out with the pizzeria, and now you've expanded quite a bit. You've got a fine dining spot, you've got the counter service, gelato, food hall, food truck, cheesesteaks, like just a wide variety of businesses. What made you want to, I guess initially, what made you want to go outside of the world of pizza? And then I'm also curious about like how you build a team for that variety. But we can start with just like what made you want to venture outside of the pizza world a little bit.
Well, for sure. And it started like, okay, let's get another Andolini's. And then it was going great. And we're like, well, we should do gelato. Let's have a gelateria. And we'll have that at certain Andolini's and just solo gelaterias. And like, oh, the rules still like completely worked of how to build a brand, how to build a team. The logo's different. Maybe the menu's different. The brand voice might be slightly different, but the rules stayed the same. It was a system. So then it was, okay, we got the location next to our most successful Andolini's. We actually debated making it a bigger Andolini's, but that would have been cost prohibitive because then we would have had to add sprinklers. We would have had to have both sites closed. We're like, this is dumb. We should just do something else. What else? And we're very food driven. So we're like, let's do fine dining of everything we would want to have that we just aren't having. So only fresh pasta, super experience driven. That fresh mozzarella I mentioned, let's do that at the table. Let's make Alfredo and a Parmesan Reggiano wheel at the table. So then we're like, okay, this will be cool. And then instead of just like a really great avant-garde beer focused bar, let's have a more whiskey focused with a lot of Prosecco's at this bar. And so it differentiated brand, but that did exceptionally well. So the food hall people came to us and they're like, hey, we really know that with your acumen, this could be a success. We started with an Andolini's. They were like, this is already like too close. Let's let one of our employees come up with another brand. This employee, Tara, has all sorts of crazy, cool ideas. Let her just run with it. And then what do you want in a food hall? Cheesesteaks. There wasn't an option. We were passionate about that. So something that's like Italian inspired, we do very well with. And so it's just taking that. And at this point, like we could go to another city and do well, but in this town, it's like we're a Tarantino film. Like Tarantino can make a movie about basket weaving. I'm still going to go see it. So in Tulsa, if Andolini's is doing something, it carries a brand recognition because they know we're not going to half-ass it.
Right. So it more just like you wanted to stay, local, but you can't just have a dozen of the same thing. Capitalize on each other. This just kind of gives you that variety. Awesome. So as far as the system goes, I'm curious about like how do you build a team that can service such a wide variety of restaurants? What kind of stays the same when it comes to training and hiring and the retention pieces, and what is a little bit more dependent on the concept itself. I'm curious about things like, do you cross train? Do people work at different concepts? Do you rise up the ranks, and can you jump from the slice shop to the fine dining? Like, how does all of that kind of work?
Great question. And it's everything you said. You hit the nail on the head. Like, we're all about growing in the company. If someone's killing it as a server, they can eventually work at Proximo. All of our GMs are from within. We've learned it's very hard to be captain of the football team first day of freshman year. So we bring people up, and the mentality on the overarching mentality about staff is that people don't want to suck. They want a path to not sucking. And if you can provide them that path, they will do great. But you have to provide them the path. And a lot of times people aren't provided the path. And owners are like disenfranchised. Like, these kids don't care and they don't understand. I'm like, well, have you given them a path to care? Especially coming from the Marine Corps, where my brother was in it, my dad was in it, I was in it. These 18-year-olds could be effective when there's motivation behind it, and they ain't doing it for the money. They're doing it for the ideological, hey, I want to be better than myself. I want to win. And when you can key into that, this job is just a lot easier, and it's not so much a job anymore. And I think that's what a lot of restaurant owners fail to realize, having core values, having what you stand for, having them understand that this is a team. I don't use the term family because, hey, I'm a teammate of yours. I will work to make sure I have your back. You will work for mine, and we all work for Andolini's. You don't work for me. We all work for Andolini's. And when that's the belief, through actual actions, stuff changes and it gets better. And I've seen that 180 other restaurants when they start to look at it that way, as opposed to, I paid them, I don't understand. And then to training, it's an investment. Like, any great investment, the more you invest in it, the bigger the return. So when people are like, I can't, we just have them follow someone for a few days, and if they don't work out, they don't work out. I'm like, you did all this work to hire, to interview, to onboard, and then you're just kicking them out of the nest. And some people are not going to fly when kicked out of the nest. You give them a more runway. It's a higher likelihood. And if anyone's ever really knocking their staffing pool, I'm like, is McDonald's staffed in your town? And they're like, well, they're McDonald's employees. I'm like, yeah, and they're totally systemized to work. Olive Garden has a full staff today. So no matter what restaurant you're in, there's another restaurant that's a corporate restaurant that has leaned into everything but food at this point to maximize their efficiency. So if you could have great food and that local presence and maximize efficiency with the system that staff have a key in and buy-in, you have such a massive advantage that it's almost insane to not defeat them.
Absolutely. Why don't you use the word family?
I think there's a few problems with the word family. Like, your family, are you going to fire a member of your family? And then family almost sounds like you could take it, like, working with family could either be great or horrible. If they're like, what are you going to do? You're going to fire me? Like, that's bad. When people are like, hey, I'd do anything for you. But again, going back to the military, you act like a band of brothers per se. You would die for each other, but you're also aware that you are not blood. You are aware that, hey, if one person's not cutting the mustard, they're off the team. Straight up, we are all going to work our ass off for each other, but you got to pull your weight. And then when I see this dynamic in certain restaurants where they will get the clubhouse mentality, they'll need 3 servers to run a lunch shift. And then 2 will call out, one because their boyfriend broke up, the other one because they're just hungover, and they're like, don't even worry about it. Just stay home. We're good. We'll figure it out, because their loyalty starts to go towards each other rather than to the customer.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. So like the family gives you like the kind of leeway, or, it's family, you kind of look the other way sometimes, or like these kind of things. And that just, even though it's just a word, it still instills it's a very heavy word. What are some of the more, from a staffing standpoint, what's something that's a little bit more different across concepts? Do you find that there's a large difference between, the fine dining spot and the a Proximo and the slice shops, or like the food halls, or is training pretty much kind of all covered the same way?
I like a 5-day training regardless. I think training needs to have three components of it. All training really is three components. And most restaurants will stop at on site, just, hey, you're here. The next one would be one to one. And then the best is to have some level of book training with one to one followed up by on site. So that would be, hey, here's a video and a PDF of how to make a pepperoni pizza. Now I'm going to make it in front of you. Now you make it. Okay, that was good. Do it again until they've physically shown that they could do it. Not just like nod your head. You get it? Uh-huh. Which is very bad. And then, all right, for the rest of tonight, you're going to make every single pepperoni pizza. That's the way you build a team. And that's just functionally understanding how to do one item of the menu. So then it's, front of house, how to do, here's the scripting fence. You need to mention this and mention this, mention this. Here's a suggestion, but make it your own. That's the win of that. Like, okay, hey, you've been boxed in before other jobs or say this exact script or get fired, or there's no script, figure it out. I like the mix of here's the guardrails, now make it your own. You would see great employees come from PF Chang's, lots of finite scripting. Chick-fil-A, lots of finite scripting, but they also are like militant in a good way and a bad way because it's very much like this is the only way to sell this chicken sandwich and nothing else. So if you could make it your own, I think it builds an incentive to last longer, to be more stoked about the job.
Cool. So training seems to follow the same structure, right? But obviously the tasks and the things that are being taught are specific to each concept, but you kind of keep that same approach.
Yeah.
So we talked a couple of years ago for a piece on 7-Shifts, and we talked about your retention, and you mentioned having a pretty low attrition rate compared to the rest of the industry. I'm curious, since then, it was a couple of years ago now, what's been the biggest challenge, in keeping that attrition low? And what are some of the ways that you work to keep your staff happy and retain them, so you're not always hiring all the time?
Well, I think our attrition rate has still maintained a low level because we actually brought all of our employees that were not managers that had been with us for over a year into a room. And it was probably like 60 employees that came to this. And we called it the consortium. And we had a different person who's not me or an owner or any manager. So a friend of mine who's a facilitator ask questions for a whole day. We pay them all like, I think, $200 each to get a real vibe of what they knew. And why do people stay? Why do good people leave? What would make you want to leave? What makes you want to stay long? And we were really surprised that the number one reason most of them were around was because they believed in the company. And we do a lot of donations, but we don't advertise them. And I'm only saying it now, like it's not a humble brag. We just never do it. Like there's certain things that are near and dear to us that we don't advertise, but they were seeing these donations go out the door. They were seeing what we were doing that we weren't advertising. So even though we were outwardly trying not to benefit from this stuff, just saying, hey, here's our due diligence to be good people. And hey, make these pizzas, they're off ticket. It still resonated. And it still was like, oh crap, this is why they're here. All right. Now, that was a big one, and it proved the ideological point that we were just doing it intrinsically, not overtly. Beyond that, it's having real functional approach to evals. Without fail, every quarter, discussing, hey, where are you at? What do you like? What do you think you could be doing better? What could we be doing better? So they can say everything, say where they want to go, have no ambiguity, because that's a massive enemy of a restaurant. And then the big coup de grace of our evals is they get to write down, it's like, what are your final thoughts on this? So the computer, like, it's all being filled out on a Google form in the computer, and then they have to hit enter. So write all your thoughts and you hit enter. And that's going to me and all of leadership. So if they're like, I like this job, but I want to quit because of this and this and this, they could write that. No harm, no foul. They're not going to get in trouble. But we get to, like, when we started doing that, where there's a few people like, I love this job, but there was a discrepancy in my pay last year. I never got resolved. So they've just been sitting on that for a year, probably building up anger about it. Like, well, hold on. Let's fix that right now. Why did you not say anything? I said it once and no one did anything. It's like, okay, it slipped through the cracks. You've been holding on to it this whole time. Let's immediately fix that. So communication without ambiguity that doesn't allow for antipathy is how you keep a low attrition rate from a very, very functional level.
Yeah, and then so you're doing those evals every quarter for every single employee.
Yeah. Then that's like the sit down out of the rush eval. Like every day we're doing a check-in, we're doing what's going on, but that's a functional deep level one.
Yeah, and then so is there like a follow up meeting with a manager after that? After you get those filled out, or how does it work once an employee fills out the like the quarterly eval?
Well, if there's it now, that manager who's their direct supervisor knows where they're going and where they've been and what they want, so they could create the plan from there. The GM could say, okay, great, they want to learn front of house as well. Let's add that in. If it's, hey, this egregious thing, I'm seeing it, so I can make moves if I need to break the chain of command, which I'm a big proponent of the chain of command. But if they're like, you know, I want an employee to be able to reach out to me, but I also expect that they go through the. If they say we shouldn't be selling this item, I'm like, okay, have you talked to anyone about it? Or why do you believe that? Like, I'll hear it out. Or, hey, we need to fire that person. Like, have you talked to your manager first? No. Okay, well, let's do that first. But then they're like, no, I did, and they still didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, let's all talk about it, and then we can get in a room and figure it out.
Very cool. So beyond those evals and some of the other stuff, I remember when we talked, you did like you had like an Olympic, like a festival, like a team kind of celebration thing. I forget the name of it, if you remind me.
We
But
call it Andomania.
that's it.
And
Yes.
we're going to be doing it we're doing our next one in like 3 weeks.
That's exciting.
So yeah, it's just how much dumb fun can we have? And it started because like we're doing staff development parties, but they just turned into people drinking with their own social circles at some random place. So we're like, how can we bring people together to compete, to have fun, to eat food, to like meet people that aren't in their group, and to have a title belt, which I have another one of it right behind me here. So
yeah.
it's been such a success, and we build it up each year, and it's more than just a party. It's more than just staff development. It's, again, creates lower attrition. It does many things. If I was just a soulless corporate automaton, I would do it. Luckily, like, I like the people, so it helps, but I can't, when people are like, oh, we don't have time for parties. I'm like, you really don't have time to not have a party.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the activities that you have planned? Anything you can share?
Well, this year we switch up the location each year. This year is at a brew pub that has a volleyball court. So I was like, let's call it Andomania Ball.
Okay, very cool.
I'm devising it like to play volleyball with like a team of 10, which is way too many people. But then a few people at the same time have to be eating a pizza while the ball is in play. And it's just layering on dumb and stupid on top of dumb and stupid, and trying to make it as ridiculous as possible so that everyone's laughing and having a great time.
Absolutely. And that just it seems like it's, yeah, I think it's cool that you made that, like, the observation that the staff parties had just become kind of like, reinforcing maybe some of the like the clicky stuff, or it wasn't doing anything to build up and making those changes. It seems like it's had quite the impact, and it sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm curious now as well. So there's Mike Bausch, the business owner, and if you go on social media, you're there every day posting different tips on Instagram, and the YouTube channel is quite active. So, and then you have the Unsliced course, which I want to hear about as well. So, tell me about kind of shifting into that role now as mentor and educator for the restaurant industry, and what you hope to, what your goals are with kind of putting yourself out there like that.
Right on. Like, we grew Andolini's to 30K on Instagram, and we have like 80,000 emails. So there's always more to do with Andolini's. That's never going to die. But as I said before, when we were like, do we want to go into another city? It was like, well, we really don't. And I would just, on a lark, just because I like to write, would do tips for pizza today. And then more and more people are asking me questions. So I put it all of the stuff I could that would help people, not just to do it, into a book with no angle. And that was the Unsliced book. But then more people like, hey, fly out to me and help this and this. We did a little bit of it. And it was just like, I don't want to take up a week of my life doing that. And I know what you need to do, because here's our system. So, but I don't want every corporate chain to have it. I don't want someone who just wants to use the stuff and like, okay, turn and burn. I want independent operators who want the path, but there was no path for me. There was just, there was on the food side, Tony helped, but still like, hey, here's how you make an HR manual, okay, you can go to your HR team, but what about the mentality of being an owner? There's really not a lot of people who are active owners speaking to other active owners about that. And it's a passion project that I don't think it should be this hard, especially for the people who really want to be in their community, help the culture of it, take this big risk. If I can minimize that risk, then who am I to not do that if I have the capacity and the communication ability to do so? So there's that, and then from a from a functional standpoint, it is way easier to make content for this than it is for Andolini's. Like food shots, like hold on, shoot it again, take it, slow it down. Okay, now get the chew shot. All right, pull it out. Like food photography and video is hard.
Yes.
Me talking to camera, riffing, I could bang out 28 videos in 29 minutes. Like it's not hard for me. And then it's just edit and post it. It's so, and the beauty of it with schedulers and all the apps and all the things I've worked through is I know how to do it at a very, very effective level without a ton of cash outlay, getting good editors, having a workflow. Everything I do is creating a system, then managing the system instead of the person. And because I've done that hundreds of times for Andolini's, doing it for this it's kind of a cakewalk.
Yeah. And what has been what's been the response online? Are people into it? Have been engaging a lot? I see, you're posting every day, really great stuff and helpful stuff.
Yeah. I only started posting aggressively since 2 months ago and went from 1,800 on Instagram to 5,800 pretty darn quick. Now I know a lot of places that'll have 100,000 on follow, but my followers are pretty much all 100% restaurant people. So it's speaking to that niche audience and then giving them something that's going to help them out, whether they're just starting or they've been around for 10 years. People that can humble themselves and say, hey, I don't know it all. I'm a very affordable option to get you way faster and way further in the game. That's a big thing. I just want people to know what's not BS and to know what is. I'll say this. I mean, you haven't asked me to say it, but 7 Shifts is not BS. And it's a part of what I talk about, like having a scheduler connected in, knowing how to use it, knowing what to look for with a variance report, and then how to also, to schedule with empathy. I'm not seeing a lot of people out there in the community speaking to the people talk about the functional. There's not a lot of people talking about the emotional. And it's speaking to, if you don't schedule ahead of time enough and give people enough opportunity to request off, and then if things go to crap, how are you going to ask them to cover a shift? If you don't do that well, the number one reason people quit their job in a restaurant is because of bad managers. And the schedule is the direct reflection of that manager. I've seen tons of people quit restaurants over the years because of a poorly designed schedule.
Yeah, that scheduling with empathy. I had that quote in the last article I did with you a while back, and I've referred back to it so many times because it's just the perfect way to say it. And I am curious as well with your following and with Unsliced and the system. Is it predominantly geared towards pizzerias or that style of restaurant, or does it fit? It fits everything.
Because we have fine dining and the cheesesteak and everything. I was like, at first I was all, this system worked across everything we do. Well, it worked beyond pizza. And then we have people who aren't in pizza who are posting up all these wins. So I'm like, there's even my book Unsliced was positioned to the pizza community, but there's no pizza recipes in there. If you want that, you go to Tony Gimignani's Pizza Bible or The Pursuit of Pizza. There's plenty of books on that. There's very few on the operational workflows of an owner of a restaurant from an owner of a restaurant. And that's a market that's kind of untapped, and from people to see, hey, here's what I am doing that's successful, proven. If you want it, here you go. And then a feedback loop on a weekly Zoom call to check in to make sure that they're killing it, to make sure that they're doing what they want to be doing and that they're getting out of it. Because the problems I see with the restaurant industry, or for people, some people, it's just the owners aren't on the same page. Okay, you fix that, their lives are better. Some people are amazing chefs, they have no awareness of their financials. They just rely on a CPA and they're afraid of looking. And they're like, I can't even begin to know where to start. That's an easy fix, but it's a problem that they don't know where to start to fix. Marketing, they're like, I posted something on Instagram. Are we Instagram famous yet? Like, well, who are you positioning it to? What does it look like? Simple stuff. Then you get into the employees and they're like, I paid them, and all the stuff we talked about today, like how to lean in, create core values, create onboarding that works, all that kind of stuff. Then everyone else, like the health department, your food vendor, how to build that relationship, not just give me cheaper stuff, but how to build that relationship. And then the last thing I'm a big proponent of is now how do we systemize it? You know what each thing is. How do you take the stuff that you love and do it on your terms? Like if you love working the line, great. But if you're working the line because you're afraid of the world burning around you, like you're playing music on the Titanic, not great. And that's what I want people to get past.
That's awesome. And so, yeah, the system touches pretty much every aspect of restaurants, like you said, from the vendor relationships, marketing, the metrics, the employee stuff, and systemizing it all. So it's not just like it seems like it really dives into every aspect of it.
That's how I designed it. So yeah, and the response has been overwhelming. No one's asked no one has come back and said this was worthless. Like everyone's posting up big wins, which is exactly what I wanted it to be.
Well, that's a great sign. And do you do it like in cohorts, or is it, people can kind of join it at any time?
I don't do it in cohorts. People, if they are interested, they can fill out an application. We'll evaluate your brand and everything. And then if we accept you in the program, then you have access to all the stuff. And then we do a weekly Q&A call. And then we have our community, kind of like a Facebook group, but where people can say, hey, here's my menu. What do you guys think? And everyone could do their feedback based upon what we teach in Unsliced.
Yeah, and I'll link to it in the podcast description. And just to kind of close things out before we have some like lightning round type questions, but I'm curious. I know you said you have Andomania coming up. What are you looking forward to with the business or with Unsliced for the rest of this year? And do you have any exciting plans that you want to share?
Sure. I mean, like Andomania is a really good one. We just released new pizza boxes that were super fun. That looked like a Louis Vuitton style. Getting into the fall is always super fun around Tulsa. Our food truck has a lot of great events planned, and I'm looking forward to all those. So that's going to be. It's just always a great time in Tulsa.
I think that's all we have today. But Mike, thanks so much for taking the time out today and joining us on the show.
Right on. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Thanks again for checking out this episode of The Pre-Shift. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review and rating and share it with one of your friends to help the show grow. Also, be sure to subscribe to our Food Runner newsletter. Once a month, you get a roundup of resources, practical tips, and industry leader insights to learn more quickly. Sign up at 7shifts.com/foodrunner. Check the link in the description. Until next time.